Alright, so this one's definitely going to be on the shorter side, and it's kind of more of a teaser video that I will definitely come back and do an update on later. But I've mentioned prescribed burns in a few of my other videos talking about forest management and just land management in general. And some friends of mine, a local community in Eco Village, they actually did their first prescribed burn over this past weekend. I was traveling out of town and wasn't able to attend for the burn, but I just visited the land and I walked around through the landscape after the burn, and I just wanted to share that footage with you guys and talk a little bit about prescribed burns, what they look like, why, just kind of dive into this topic a little bit. And then, like I said, once we get into spring and things start growing again, I can make an update on kind of like the evolution of this site post burn. I think it's pretty interesting, and it's a really good example of what can be accomplished with burns. So this was a prescribed fire. It was carried out by professionals, by people who had been trained to do this safely and effectively. And right here, part of the reason that we're trying to do this is to clean up the woods, basically try to remove unwanted species or unwanted vegetation. The basic gist is that anything that's small, any small plants are going to get burned, either killed entirely or burned back to the roots. A lot of the larger trees, they're big enough that they can survive this fire because it was a really low intensity burn. If a fire is really hot, it can get hot enough to kill the larger trees, but if we're burning these small prescribed burns, it's not going to affect these larger trees in any negative way. It actually will probably positively affect them because the burn is going to actually release a lot of nutrients into the soil. Additionally, we're burning off some of the fuel on the forest floor, so if we have a really dry season and there is a real risk of unintentional wildfires being started, we've used up a lot of our fuel, and so these woods should be safer. And you could see when I was digging around there at the beginning of the video, we only burned the top layer. Right, and there's some sycamore seeds falling right on the freshly burned surface. You can see you go down, and very quickly you get to a moist duff layer. The soil is relatively moist underneath all of this, even though we just had a fire. So we did not harm any of the life below the ground. We just burned off the top layer. Now, in addition to killing off smaller plants, there are also certain plant species that are less fire susceptible. Most of the species that this group wants in the forest, the native hardwood forest trees, they're mostly adapted in this region to fire. So we're trying to kill off a lot of the species that are not appropriate in this setting. And it's important to note that many of the things that were killed were only top killed. Like I said, things below ground were not affected by such a small fire, and so a lot of these plants will resprout from the roots. Now, that resprouting is something that we need to take account of and potentially manage for. People will have to come back through here, and if there's things that they really don't want, they'll have to keep cutting back some of that new growth. But that new growth is actually beneficial for certain species of wildlife. A lot of grazing animals rely on the regrowth that is low to the ground, right? When a tree gets super tall, grazing animals can't graze those leaves, but if there's a lot of resprouting stuff, that's food for the animals. Anyway, there's a ton of other benefits to prescribed burns. It's, low intensity fires like this have been part of these ecosystems for thousands and thousands of years. Indigenous people have been using this technology long before us. Here's an example of, they also tried burning a section of their pasture. This is a really, really valuable pasture management tool. Hopefully we killed some of these sweet gum invaders into this field, or at least hopefully we top killed them anyway. And I'm looking forward to update on all of this. It's really going to be exciting to see how this place pops off in the spring and just continue to follow the evolution of this site post-burn.